Okay, we're back, and I'm delighted to say Vanessa has agreed to stay on with us. That's thank you very much, Vanessa.
Well, it's a pleasure. Don't make it sound like I was forced to.
Where are we starting?
Well,
The BBC.
well, I've got a question for Vanessa about the BBC, right? Because I'm confused because the BBC has a reporter, a blonde female reporter, by a sheer coincidence, called Sonia McLaughlin, and she talks about rugby, and she was talking about the Wales, England v Wales rugby match, which was somewhat controversial due to some refereeing decisions. So she tweeted out, quote, "Thanks for using the @ sign so it's all hit home. Now imagine getting inundated with abuse for doing your job. In my car crying, hope you're happy," end quote. Now, when I saw that, I assumed that the BBC would send out to the people abusing her a photograph of her car, a photograph of the number plate, and a GPS location of the reporter, so that the angry rugby fans could go around and berate her in person. But no, this didn't happen. The BBC said, Sonia has long been a key member of our Six Nations team, and she absolutely has our full support. The BBC Sport strongly condemns the online abuse experienced by Sonia McLaughlin after the Wales v England match. So, my question for you, Vanessa, is how come it's so different? Is it simply the BBC saying, well, abusing blonde female journalists, it's okay when we do it?
Well, I think I play for the wrong team. I think that's basically what it comes down to, doesn't it? I'm not on the BBC team. I think that's the bottom line. Therefore, I'm legitimate prey. I also have to say that when I looked at the guidelines, the BBC guidelines for the use of, well, let's say images of people's cars, it states very clearly that it should be taken into consideration that an image on a social media site does not equate to putting it onto a front page BBC article with the very clear targeting by Chloe Hadjimatheou around that image. You know, I mean, as I said, this looks very much like deliberate targeting, harassment, and the putting life at risk. There was actually another case, I'm pretty sure, I haven't double checked, with Murad Gajdiev of RT, when RT and BBC were covering events in Manbij to the north of Aleppo at one point. I think it was in 2017. And the BBC team published images of RT cars showing the number plates on Twitter. Now, I mean, this caused an immediate storm. Of course, RT have greater impetus than I do. And the images were immediately taken down. An apology was actually issued because they put the RT team of journalists at risk in an area that was actually at that point a hot area in the conflict. So, you know, yeah, you're quite right. I think you tweeted that report out to me. I did have a bit of a giggle, but yeah, I think it all comes down to which team you're on, and I'm clearly not on the right team.
Probably in more way than one, but anyway, David, do you want to talk?
I've got one other thing that's sort of come out from the BBC.
Well, look, just before you go on to that, because this is a good point. I think we've or somebody has mentioned this to me already, and Magpie 1966 is saying in the chat box, the BBC should provide a replacement car. I'm thinking something fast and expensive. Not only should they not only
Yeah.
should they provide a replacement car, they should pay for the costs of crushing that car, because this really is the bit that I find the worst about it. The person who owns the car can't sell the car because the risk is now attached to the car, and so this is affecting not just your life, and they do need to be taken to task for this. Now, at the weekend,
that was exactly my first reaction to it as well. That the BBC, having done this, have to make it right, and that means replacing the car and paying for the scrapping of the existing one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I put out a UK column email at the weekend suggesting that people actually do get in contact with Ofcom, and I think this would be a very, very good thing for people to do. Not only because it's an easy thing to do, because I linked in the email to the form that you need to fill in, so it's a simple thing to do, but also because it perhaps helps with another matter, and that is Ofcom itself. Now, Ofcom, unfortunately for Ofcom, does have responsibility for material which appears on the BBC website. And so if they receive 10, 15, 20,000 complaints, and I see no reason why they shouldn't, if they receive that sort of scale of complaint about this, they're going to have to do something about it. The fact that Ofcom is largely manned by former BBC people and people that in many cases are in the receipt of BBC pensions, at the very least, if they take no action, or they have to respond to it, they have to produce an answer. If they decide to take no action, they're exposing themselves for what they are. So this can only be a win for us all, because no matter what they do, whether they censure the BBC for what they've done, or whether they let the BBC off with a slap in the wrist, or in fact do nothing, either way, we are going to win out of this. So I really would encourage people to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
David, back to you.
And back to Syria, I was looking up. I didn't know much about Dr. Rola Halam, and I was looking her up during the show. She's been busy. Chief Executive Officer and founder of Can Do.
Yes, but that's not the one I was talking about. That's the colleague. But she's a perfectly good yes. So that's a perfectly. I mean, talk about her, because she is a busy girl. And by the way, Brian and Patrick met her father, Rola Halam's father, and went to London to meet him. To ask some questions, because remind me, Vanessa, the father was busy with the opposition because he's Syrian. He was very much on the opposition side, and then she was popping up, promoting. In propaganda material by the BBC, which was really to justify bombing Syria.
I mean, actually, if you follow pretty much all of them, and that includes Paul Conroy, of course, who was the kind of Mary Colvin colleague who produced the movie that the name escapes me right now, and Hassan, the two doctors, Halam and Hassan, that were mentioned in Robert Stewart's forensic analysis of the Panorama Saving Syria's Children. And of course, Riyam Dalati was one of the producers on Saving Syria's Children, who was then mired in controversy for having pointed out, one, that the terrorist organizations had rearranged the bodies for the images that were being produced to sell the idea of a Syrian government chemical attack in Douma 2019. And he also later tweeted out that he was now convinced that the hospital scenes were staged, which of course would have meant by the white helmets and the armed groups, Jaish al-Islam, that were working together in Douma to produce these staged events. And of course that Jaish al-Islam PR was done by Emma Winberg, widow of James Le Mesurier, who founded Incostrat, that was funded by the UK Foreign Office Conflict, Stability and Security Fund, that also funded Mayday Rescue and the White Helmets and a number. I mean, the thing is, once you start unraveling this, the connections are vast. And I've completely forgotten the name of the doctor you mentioned, Mike Hassan.
Yeah,
The first one you
Saleha
mentioned.
Hassan, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there she is. Let's just put her back on screen.
She's basically on the board of what it used to be called Medics Under Fire. Now, Medics Under Fire includes Dr. Knott. If you remember, he produced the extraordinary story of the Syrian Arab Army sniping fetuses in pregnant women's bellies and showing images of a bullet lodged in the fetus inside the woman's body while he was operating on ISIS fighters inside Idlib and terrorist-held areas. But the other member of Medics Under Fire, Hamish Breton Gordon, of course, instrumental in the chemical weapon story and narratives. He invented the extraordinary fridge bomb idea, which was, of course, ridiculed by most experts. And then you have Toby Cadman. Now, Toby Cadman is part of the ICC, or part of Guernica Chambers, the legal chambers that is pushing the ICC to take President Assad to court. He's tried various methods, all of which have failed. But interesting to note that very recently, a British lawyer has been elected to, I think it's Director General. I'm trying to think of the actual term for the head of prosecution, the head of prosecution in the ICC, Karim Khan, who's a QC in the UK. But when you look at Karim Khan's connections to Toby Cadman, to Rodney Dixon, to all of the people behind this push to sort of carry out a Milosevic-type operation against President Assad, Karim Khan has clear connections to them. So, sorry, I've sort of segued a little bit there, but what I'm trying to show is that all these people interconnect into this nexus of propaganda producing, of PR for armed groups, of PR for the military-industrial complex and the UK Foreign Office. And the majority of them, of course, receive funding from the Foreign Office to do that.
And something we shouldn't forget is, of course, the suggestion by Robert Stewart, and just so that everybody understands this, in 2013, the Saving Syria's Children documentary went out, but prior to the full documentary going out, there was a short news report on the BBC News, and if I remember rightly, the news report was scheduled on the same day that the vote was taking place in Parliament for the bombing of Syria. Now, Patrick and I, our spider senses went off over that, and we started looking into it, and we started discovering certain things, and then subsequently, several months later, we came across Robert, and what was one of the reasons that we were so convinced by his research was because it tied in with a lot of the stuff that we had done already. And so we were able to verify some of the stuff that he had done. But one of the things that he discovered was that, of course, Saleha Hassan had produced, again, it might have been I think it was for the BBC, had produced a report all about the use of very, very realistic dummies and things for training purposes, for frontline medical training in war zones and so on. And they were quite open. She was quite openly showing wounds which were in some cases absolutely identical to the ones that were seen in Saving Syria's Children, and yet she's the doctor who ends up being on the ground for that documentary. So it was without doubt a complete and utter fraud, in my opinion.
Also interesting that when I entered a couple of white helmet centers in the south of Syria, close to Quneitra, the border with the occupied territories occupied by Israel, of Golan territories, I found a number of those fake wound dummies and arms and legs and so on in the actual white helmet centers. I photographed all of them. I haven't actually produced a report on that because, of course, the argument will be, well, yeah, but we used it for paramedic training, blah, blah, blah. And there were no chemical attacks as such that I'm aware of in the south of Syria. Of course, the majority of them have been in Damascus and then to the north of Damascus. And so I can concur with that those items were definitely being supplied to the White Helmets. And of course, we know that the White Helmets work in collaboration. Actually, that's one interesting point from the article, the 7,700 word article that Chloe Hedge-Matthew published on the front page of the BBC website. She does actually concede that the White Helmets worked alongside the armed groups, shared buildings with them. So that's actually quite a major concession. I feel, okay, I mean, it's not worth the image of the car, but it's still a concession on behalf of the BBC. It's still it's a recall of previous claims that the White Helmets had nothing to do with the armed groups. They simply worked in the same areas, but they didn't collaborate. So, we are seeing a degree of reticence by the BBC to pursue certain elements of the story. And I think what you're also seeing is, well, where the story itself is failing, or rather their attempt to shore up the Foreign Office construct that has been responsible for much of the destabilization of Syria. That aspect is failing. And so I think what they're now trying to do is the typical actual Zionist tactic, which is to attack the messengers. Peter Ford is also attacked once more in that article, myself, and basically anyone that has been influential or effective in exposing the Foreign Office involvement in the intelligence operations inside Syria. And of course, you also have to remember that according to the Foreign Office document leaks, people like Emma Winberg, the company she worked for, she co-founded with Paul Tilley, another former military contractor, the very similar background to James Le Mesurier, were also, according to the documents, responsible for providing witnesses and basically actors for BBC reports, among others. So, I mean, and the extraordinary thing is that the BBC programme, the BBC article, the BBC full stop, is simply omitting Emma Winberg's involvement in this entire sham of a regime change movement that has been funded and driven by the British Foreign Office, and one assumes by the intelligence agencies. But her role in that is being completely omitted from any BBC reporting, which is lying by omission.
Yes. Now look, this is an outlier comment in the chat box, but I just want to mention it because somebody, I can't remember who it was, sorry, somebody has said in the chat box, why is Syria important? There's nothing that we can do about it. Now, there's a number of reasons why I'm going to challenge that comment. First of all, we very much can do something about it because there is no question that in 2013, the public prevented the bombing of Syria at that time. There was enough pushback against what the government was planning that they did not proceed with it. And because Britain did not proceed with it, the United States did not proceed with it, it is absolutely something that we can do something about because we have done something about it before. But the other point here is that what we've got to understand is how the mainstream media has operated here. They have, through their media development programs, funded by the Foreign Office and the US State Department, but largely by the Foreign Office, they have gone into countries like Syria in order to train journalists in those countries. And I use the word journalist in that context very loosely. they go in to those countries and train people to promote a UK-based narrative. Those people become the local voices on the ground that then the BBC and Channel 4 go to for their information. And therefore, what we have in this country returned to us is information which has come from the UK Foreign Office, effectively laundered through local people in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, wherever it happens to be. And of course, those people are also used to drive regime change in those countries. This is our government doing this. It's our problem because those countries don't deserve to be attacked in this way by our government.
Well, I think the other thing to remember, and you know, this. Sorry, Dave.
No,
I think the very important thing to remember is that Britain has spent around 3 billion on this war. You know, 3 billion, which they're claiming they don't have for a COVID-19 response to the lockdown I'm talking about. So, you know, stopping what the British government, successive British governments have been doing in Syria is of enormous importance to people in the UK. The NHS, our emergency services in the UK are decimated while they are paying millions to the White Helmets, billions in humanitarian aid to terrorist groups controlled by Al-Qaeda inside Syria to destabilize a country. Then you're going to be complaining about the immigrants coming into the UK because the British government is destroying yet another country and driving people out of their homes and to leave their country because it's untenable economically to stay here, right? So Syria is of huge importance. And I think, as I've said before on a previous extra, we need to stop thinking in national identity, in left-right paradigms. We need to start seeing the connections between ourselves as humanity without sounding too esoteric. But the war that is being waged against the British people is the war that has been waged against prey nations like Syria, like Iraq, like Libya, like Venezuela, like Yemen for decades. You know, and we need to start making those connections because we are all now part of the same resistance against the same powers, the same predator class, the same parasites that are looking to bleed us dry also.
David. Yeah, I was going to make a very similar point that yes, there's huge funds being sucked out of Britain, British taxpayers. We are forced to pay for our own enslavement, and we're now also paying for enslavement around the world, and it gets a bit pricey. And obviously there's other things that don't happen as a result. And also the secrecy is necessary because the British people wouldn't support any of this if they knew. And the nature of the secret state that we live in, and the fact that Tony Blair's one regret for his time in office was the Freedom of Information Act, I think is very telling in that. And the nature of the cover-up and corruption you're seeing in Scotland, which is just a more egregious version of the things we're seeing all around the UK. They are vital because it's necessary to keep the facts from the British people. And this is why Vanessa's car registration number was published by the BBC, because she's putting facts to the British people that they're desperate to keep from them. The whole agenda requires a bodyguard of intellectual justification, and that can't stand up to scrutiny. It can't stand up to light. And the more light we let in, the more disinfecting sunlight we let into the thing, the better. And the degree to which if we acquiesce to the subjugation of the Syrian people because, hey, it's not us, then we can be sure that pretty soon it will be us. It'll come for us next. Yeah. Which is why I quoted Gilad Atzmon. I got a bit of pushback from some people on this a wee while ago. I quoted Gilad Atzmon, who said we're all Palestinians now, and he was talking about the clampdown on freedom within the UK, and his overriding point is that there is a common humanity, and if you acquiesce to the loss of freedom, the loss of rights, the loss of liberty, and a totalitarian oppression of people, then it will come for you too. It's ultimately we'll all share the same fate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Mike, the other example of how the public pushed back was, if you remember, when the White Helmets were nominated for a Peace Prize in 2016, and it was derailed, and I can tell you now, it was derailed in the offices of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. So it was very last minute, but it was public pressure that did that. If you remember, The Guardian started trying to shut down on comments, or they panicked. So, there are still ways to hurt them. And the same as you mentioned about the car, keep writing, keep pressuring the BBC. No, it's not. I'm seeing elements of desperation in the media. I don't know what the two of you think, but I think they're desperate. I mean, as David said in the break, they are so brazenly propaganda agents now. I mean, there's zero journalism left. I mean, it's just sordid, corrupt.
Yes,
Mike. If you pull up, there's one bit we didn't get to, which was Waco. If you could pull up the slide
we will do that.
Kind of relevant to this.
Yes, we will do that in 1 second. But I just want to, just before we do that, because we're running out of time, so we'll do this and we'll do Waco. But I just want to make this point, and that is the question of whether we can do anything about things, and so I just want to give one example where David and I, working together, actually achieved something tangible, and that was with respect to Integrity Initiative. So whenever, if you remember Integrity Initiative, this was the Institute for Statecraft Foreign Office funded anti-Russia propaganda outlet, and attention was drawn to it by a document dropped from Anonymous, which we read and were extremely interested in, and then started publicizing it. But we discovered very quickly that Integrity Initiative was apparently based in Scotland, just up the road from where David was living at the time. So David said, okay, I'll whiz up the road and have a look and see what it looks like. And it turns out that the address that they had registered with the Scottish Charity Regulator was a fake address, because the building they were in was effectively derelict. It was partially being knocked down and so on. And we were the only people that talked about this. We exposed this. It was our exclusive, and I'm just going to make that point. And then what I did was I wrote to the Scottish Charity Regulator, and this is what I said. Dear Sir, Madam, could I get a media statement, please, detailing penalties for any charity registered with you which has apparently submitted false information to you? For example, the Institute for Statecraft registered charity number blah de blah has listed Gateside Mills as its principal office, yet this address is semi-derelict, empty and undergoing partial demolition. Could you also tell me what processes and procedures you follow to confirm that data is filed is valid? And they wrote back and said, it is an offence under Section 26 of the Charities and Trustee Investment Scotland Act 2005 to knowingly provide any false or misleading information or explanation to OSCR. When we receive a concern about a charity, we deal with it in accordance with our inquiry policy. And they said we can confirm OSCR has opened an inquiry into the Institute for Statecraft. As such, it would not be appropriate to comment further. So then, subsequently, they released their report, and they said that they published the findings of the inquiry into the Institute of Statecraft, and it said this. That we wrote to the charity in August 2019 setting out our interim findings and seeking a response. Concerning the charity's failure to meet the charity test, we indicated that we might find it necessary to direct the charity to take steps to address the issues, failing which we would remove it from the Scottish Charity Register. Following our August 2019 letter, the charity trustees have continued to engage positively, but the charity has ceased to undertake any activity related to the Integrity Initiative, and this is now undertaken by a non-charitable entity having no legal connection to the charity. So again, David, when you take the appropriate action, when we take the appropriate action, when everybody takes the appropriate action, it is possible to find solutions to problems, not necessarily by going through the normal political routes, but using the institutions that are available to us, using freedom of information, using regulators like Ofcom, like the charity regulators, and just pushing back as hard as we can at every opportunity. And Integrity Initiative never recovered from that. It is gone.
Yeah. Gone. Yes, absolutely.
And we did that. So anybody that's in doubt about whether it's possible to achieve things, it absolutely is. That's the key point I'm trying to make here.
Definitely.
And anyone who's in doubt as to whether Mike Robinson can sound absolutely overjoyed, didn't hear him the day we got that video of the derelict mill. I have never seen you look happier, Mike.
Well, look, David, the thing that made me look even happier, was the reaction that I got from Chris Donnelly when I met him outside the doorway of the Defence Select Committee in Parliament, and the look that he shot me from 10 feet away of terror. It's the only thing I could say. It was terror. And during the course of that Defence Select Committee meeting, it was very interesting that the chairman of the Defence Select Committee said, "I'm glad to see you're feeling better, Chris." He clearly was he was out of action for a little while as a result of what happened there, and you know, yeah, it was that put an even broader grin on my face. Yes, but anyway, look, let's finish off with Waco.
Yeah, this is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives. They tweet out, "We remember the fallen agents, Special Agent Conway LeBeau, Special Agent Todd McKeegan, Special Agent Robert Williams and Special Agent Stephen Willis, who made the ultimate sacrifice while trying to execute a search warrant, remembering Waco." And in that link, they quote, to justify their position regarding all the dead bodies and dead children, quote, "The agency is made up of dedicated, committed and experienced professionals who have regularly demonstrated sound judgment and remarkable courage in enforcing the law. ATF has a history of success in conducting complex investigations and executing dangerous and challenging law enforcement missions." That fine tradition, together with the line agents' commitment to the truth and their courage and determination, has enabled the ATF to provide our country with a safer and more secure nation under law. Now, the thing about this is the response to this on Twitter. I've got one example, right? Because I thought this was going in the main news, and some of it you couldn't put out. But this is one example of the replies. "I think I'll choose to remember the innocent people you murdered instead. I don't make a habit of mourning war criminals." And that was one of the milder ones, and there were hundreds of them. And the fact that social media is a bit of a two-edged sword, but the fact that the lies can be called out by the ordinary man and woman, and when it happens en masse, and when it happens with passion, it's very striking. And I think it does a lot to demoralise the people who would oppress us, because they realise it's not working. They're not buying it.
Well, yeah, and most of them protect their tweets at that point. So-called journalists run for the hills. I think Chloe actually had hers protected before she even published. Olivia Solon shortly after. But yeah, the majority of them go into hiding at that point and cry victim, of course.
Yes. Chloe hid hers because of the pressure that we were putting on her at the time. I did think it was interesting that she's changed her sort of subheading on her Twitter account to being previously unknown BBC reporter.
Well, there's an element of truth to that.
Okay, look, we've got to leave it there. Thank you both very much for that. Yeah, as we said earlier, we'll be back at 1 p.m. on Wednesday as usual. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.